Now for today's program. Back in June, you may have read or heard about a highly unusual and somewhat controversial warning from NASA about our planet, that it would be subjected to devastating solar flares from a massive once-in-a-generation space storm sometime around the year 2013, or to be more precise, just a little more than 2 years from now, we could expect this huge solar event to take place. So serious were NASA's warnings that they actually convened a space weather conference in our nation's capital to discuss the necessary precautions that would be required in order to step up national security and emergency action in anticipation of a catastrophic event from space. In their published statement, NASA indicated that we should expect that an event of this magnitude would cause widespread power blackouts and the long-term loss of critical satellite communications, which would include the internet and cell phones. Senior space agency scientists are now claiming that the Earth will be hit by unprecedented levels of magnetic energy from flares that will be generated by an active sun that is awakening from a deep slumber. As a matter of fact, the director of NASA's Heliophysics Division, Dr. Richard Fisher, states in an interview with the Daily Telegraph that NASA knows it is coming to Earth, that we can't say how bad it is going to be, but we do know that it is going to cause lots of problems here on Earth. So as far as the general public is concerned, we know the following about this rather ambiguous warning from the space agency. Number one, something that will be approaching from the general direction of the sun and that contains unprecedented amounts of magnetic energy is going to hit the Earth sometime in 2012 or the following year. Number two, this solar event, as NASA calls it, will damage or destroy satellite communications across the globe, causing widespread blackouts resulting in the loss of the internet, cell phones, and an array of electronic devices for an undetermined amount of time. Number three, the government is meeting to discuss ways to deal with the devastation that is expected to occur with this solar event, setting up national security and dealing with emergency response systems. Number four, it's uncertain as to the extent of damage that this event will incur on the Earth, yet nevertheless, it is going to happen, and we should prepare ourselves now. So this is what we know. But does any of us really understand what's happening? And should we adhere to these warnings, or maybe just take it with a grain of salt? Is NASA telling us the truth, or rather keeping us in the dark about the real facts and what's actually going to happen in the days and months ahead? Our guest on today's segment, Nancy Lader, is no stranger to our show. She has been with us here a number of times and is well known by many across the internet, including her appearances on the nationally syndicated Coast to Coast and a host of local radio programs. She has devoted her time and energy to educating the public on ways to survive catastrophic events. In particular, those events created by what is referred to as a cosmic presence of considerable magnitude that is believed to be present within our solar system today, and we'll get into the meaning of this interpretation of what I'm referring to here on the program today. So I would now like to welcome back to our show, hi Nancy.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be back, and of course, it's not the sun, it's Planet X, Nibiru, Wormwood, the Great Destroyer, whatever name you want to call it. They know that our magnetosphere is already being engaged by this approaching planet, which is coming outbound from the sun, and it's slightly closer to the sun than Venus at present, but coming outbound, and it's engaging our magnetosphere. Since the middle of 2009, we've had this twisting and turning of our magnetosphere being simulated by the ACE computer, ACE satellite, which hangs up there. And sometimes our south pole disappears. Sometimes the flow, instead of going north and coming around to the south of Earth, it'll come out of the North Pole and plunge directly south, and then the return to the South Pole comes from the netters up above, down and curves into. It's just wacky. And what's causing this is Planet X, because its magnetosphere is larger than ours. It is 4 times as the diameter of Earth, 23 times the mass, and naturally it's a magnetic bully, and it wins. And as it approaches us, we're like a little magnet flipping around trying to figure out how to position ourselves so that we, because magnets do this. You can't get the North Poles to touch, for instance. Sometimes we lean, currently we're having some leaning of our North Pole too far to the south, too far to the sun, rather, and causing heat waves across our entire northern hemisphere. Russia is just baking. And then it'll sometimes flop over too far to the left, falling on its side. So people in the northern latitudes say that the sunrise and sunset is way too far north. And other times our Earth wobble is lurching more violently, causing the plate movement and more increasing earthquakes, which even with the USGS cover-up is still apparent to people on the charts when they run statistics. And you know they're dropping those earthquakes from the databases. And you know they're dumbing down the Richter so they don't tell you the truth.
Would you say that this is some sort of it's like a scaremongering type of thing by NASA? Because we know that what they're telling us is, well, that's going to be very disturbing to a lot of people who pay attention to these reports. But do those who follow these solar trends and these warnings coming from scientists, it seems a little bit confusing and misleading, to us particularly, because, for a lot of people, we know what's going on out there. But for others, and there's a lot more of those others out there, they don't know what's going on. So this is really confusing to them.
Right. Actually, here's what NASA is trying to do. They're trying to avoid admitting that Planet X is in our inner solar system. We tracked it in 2003 from the night sky, according to the theta coordinates, the right angle and declination. And it's showing up on SOHO and in the form of a winged globe or a red cross, and the dust clouds and moon swirls splotches are showing up. And they try to edit it out, and they can't. They considered taking SOHO down and decided just to ignore it instead. You can see the edit lines. They are desperately trying to avoid saying there's a planet interloper in our inner solar system approaching us, and we've been lying to you all this time, because they would have, they're under orders by their bosses to keep the cover-up going. The very wealthy, the politically powerful, and the like, known as the elite or the establishment, a general term, do not want the common man to know, because they don't want your messy panic. They don't want your demands. They don't want you saying, okay, if you've got a bunker all stocked up, where's my bed? And the like. They don't want you rioting and trying to overtake the military. They want everything calm until the last minute. Then they'll run to their bunkers and be safe. And this includes the elite, the head hierarchy at NASA. So what are they doing? At first they said, well, we know it's coming. What are we going to do? Well, let's blame global warming for all the weather changes that might happen. Let's blame the sun for any magnetic effects that might happen. And we'll blame asteroid swarms. If they see the moon swirls, they'll say, oh, it's asteroid swarms. I mean, these moons show up on the stereo ahead and behind satellites, and people have, and the internet is abuzz with discussion about what is this stuff. And people really do not believe NASA if they have enough knowledge and are informed about what the rays coming from the sun are. They recognize that they're being spoon-fed, nonsense. And
well, here's what's really perplexing about what's going on with NASA, because they seem to be, in the last few years, they've really been wavering on this solar maximum and solar minimum stuff that's coming from these people. Like in 2006, for instance, they were telling us to expect a strong cycle in which the northern lights would be visible as far south as Rome, they were saying. Then during the past couple of years, in which little or no sunspot activity occurred, they told us to expect one of the weakest cycles since 1928. And so now, in the past couple of months, in which the sun has awakened from its slumber, the folks over there at NASA are suddenly worried about this catastrophic solar storm hitting the Earth in the next couple of years. Now, Nancy, given this unreliability of the NASA team to provide an accurate prediction of future solar events, how much credence should we really place in their lasting warning of a planetary disaster from a massive solar flare in the next few years? Is there a lot of credence in this?
No, none. And what you should do is listen to Zeta Talk, who is telling you what's going to happen and where it's coming from, because we are having electromagnetic disturbances. Air France 447, for instance, went down exactly over the Atlantic Rift, which is a surface magnet, because all of its electrical systems failed. They know that because a transmission came just ahead of when it went into the water, and they never will recover the black box. But and there's been electromagnetically driven trains, that have gone awry and just suddenly surged and flown off the tracks. Airplanes are having a lot of problems. GPS is not working right, etc., and their compasses are totally unreliable. The compass is pointing oddly, way too far to the west, not north, So all of this has been predicted and explained by Zeta Talk all along, and we're going to continue to have that and blackouts because our whole grid system is designed to shut down if there's a surge or a brownout, and this is protection to keep the equipment from breaking. And dams. We've had transformers blow up in dams. There was a big one in Russia, something like that. I can't pronounce it. Another one in Brazil just shut down. There was no reason for this, or the transformer blew up because it was rushed forward to speed up too, and fried everything, exploded everything. So these are electromagnetic effects, and they know, NASA and the government, that this is going to happen, and they're trying to say to people, get ready for this, but it's the sun. You know, so that when it happens, people will say, oh, it's the sun. I mean, they're desperate in trying to make sure that you don't realize it. Now, we're seeing Planet X at times. It's 4 times the diameter of Venus and a little further away. So it's small relatively, and it's covered with a dust cloud. But every once in a while, there's a glint of sunlight, and people see 2 suns rising or setting and the like. So, and the moon swirls sometimes funnel light in such a way that there's a bunch of little light orbs around the sun that people can get. They see it naked eye. They make videos and photos. So it is visible at times, but it always can be explained away. Oh, it's an atmospheric effect, you know, or maybe you saw a sundog, or, you know, they can always poo-poo it. But when it becomes visible in the sky without question, that's going to be very close to the last weeks. And therefore, they think that they can ride this all the way until they're within a couple of months of the pole shift and then run for their bunkers and to heck with you, the taxpayer. So you're mentioning some examples of how absurd NASA's gotten. They had a recent one within this last month that was a little bitty solar flare, a coronal mass ejection, CME. It was a C3. C's are the tiny ones.
And was that the one on August, was either August 3rd or August 10th? I think there was 2 of them, wasn't there?
Yeah, it wasn't long ago. And they made a huge deal out of this. They got on the media and said, wow, you know, and that was supposed to hit on the 4th or the 5th, I think it was.
Now, that's the one they were going to refer to as the solar tsunami?
Yes, that was the one in the media, solar tsunami. This is nothing. It's like driving 5 miles an hour down the road and saying, well, the crash is going to be horrible, you know. I mean, X-class flares. I have a photo of an X-class from year 2000 when we had the last maximum, and that was like, whoa. You know, I'm throwing this up compared to what NASA was presenting on August 1st, saying, here it comes. It's like you can't even find the stupid C3 flare. So why were they doing this? Because on July 31st, 2 days ahead or 1 day ahead, there was something that happened on the magnetosphere that's stimulating, in which our part of the bow shock, that's the part that faces the sun, was deforming, melting, and going away. And they knew that something new and different was coming our way from the influence of Planet X on the magnetosphere. So they quickly jumped in on the very next day, August 1st, and said, you know, this tsunami is going to hit. But it takes 2 days, everyone knows, for something coming from the sun to hit Earth. Right. So they said, oh, it'll be around the 3rd. And then they said, no, maybe the 4th, maybe the 5th. You know, and whatever we did have, which was nothing, we had some auroras, you know, that showed up. Right. And this is like totally normal for any kind of a solar flare to have auroras, you know, show up. But we didn't have blackouts. We didn't have airplanes going down. We didn't have satellite failure. We didn't have some people were even saying we're going to have earthquakes, trying to relate earthquakes to the sun, which has never been the case. Earthquakes are not caused by solar activity. No, you know, but they're trying to relate everything caused by Planet X. They're trying to somehow, in the public mind, tie to activity in the sun. And the only reason they get the media is because the media is controlled by the powers that be, the elite, and they're all doing this cover-up scheme.
Would you say that NASA's sort of hanging in the wind these days, considering the fact they can't come out with an accurate report?
Yeah, and they even contradict themselves. There was another one, G1.9, which was something that just hit the media too recently, within I think the last week or so, about a week ago, and this is supposedly, it's a complete fraud. It doesn't even exist according to the Zetas, but they cooked this up as another way of explaining if blaming the sun did not work because the sun was so sleepy. We had no sunspots for like 260 days. It was supposed to be, you know, the solar cycle to beat all solar cycles, and then the sun went to sleep and wasn't cooperating. And it's kind of hard to lie about this entirely because they have so many, the solar weather coming in. There's so many measurements that people can get their hands on, and amateurs can look at the sun and see the sunspots and stuff. So you can only lie so much. So it wasn't cooperating. So they cooked a deal up with Spanish astronomers to say that they had discovered a body, and there's a dwarf brown star, a brown dwarf, and the pictures that they showed had, you know, like red flares on either side, which is what Nibiru looks like when it comes inbound. When it becomes visible, it'll look like a winged globe, as the ancients depicted, and that's what it looked like in 2003 when we were still able to get photos of it in the night sky. It had things coming out like a double helix swirling off either side. So, you know, they tried to make it look like this in pictures and said it swings close to the solar system, you know, every once in a while, and it will have like a magnetic or gravity, you know. And then NASA was going to pretend to argue with these people and say, oh, there's no evidence of that, and then finally accept that maybe it really was there, and then this would be the explanation for all kinds of weird stuff happening on Earth. Well, they contradicted themselves. There's an article in 2008 when this was first talked about, the Chandra, I think, probe or something had discovered it supposedly, and NASA's talking about it like, here it is, we discovered it, it's our probe, discovered it. And then in 2010 they start talking about these Spanish people are doing a hoax. At the very end they said, oh, it's a hoax. But they hadn't said that 2 years earlier. They adopted it. So they're showing their game plan. They're speaking out both sides of their mouths. They're contradicting themselves and getting kind of sloppy at it lately, too.
Well, how much longer can these scientists go on with this charade?
Well, according to the data, they're going to go on until the last minute. And you will never get the truth from NASA, basically. They will lie up until, I mean, even when there's something blazing in the sky, a second sun, you know, and you see the moon swirls flying all over, and we're having huge, you know, earthquakes all over the world, and we're swinging in our wobbles from side to side, and the sun is all over the sky, you know, then they'll still say, oh, no, it's, you know, whatever the going excuse is. Or they just won't answer their phone, and at some point they won't be at NASA headquarters either. They will be gone. And that'll be true.
It's become so blatantly obvious by that time that what more can be said?
Yeah, and you know that movie 2012, they had a note of reality there where one thing that was real about that movie was that they weren't going to tell the people until the elite escaped, the queen with her little doggies, all that. They got on the Ark, and when they were all on the Ark and they were safely away, then they would. And meanwhile, California had already crumbled and fallen into the sea and blah, blah. So the statement is we aren't going to tell the public. We're just not going to tell them. We're going to save our sorry behinds, but we're not going to tell them. And that's what the answer.
You know, what I find so curious is, you know, of course, when you hear these reports, I had posted a report about the underground bunker that supposedly they're building or have built already in underneath the airport in Denver, where supposedly all the elites are going to go when this comes down. Now, I find it really curious because how do they believe that going underground is going to guarantee their survival? And then if they were to come back up a year from now, what are they going to come back up to? You know, this is what a lot of people are wondering.
Right. Actually, the data say that these people are not really computing. You know, they're so used to shopping and having people wait on them hand and foot and just snapping their fingers and being able to arrange things the way they want, you know, because they're wealthy or politically powerful or whatever, or royalty, whatever, that they can't imagine the reality of what's really going to happen. In the first place, you know, there is going to be hurricane-force winds, magnitude 9 earthquakes everywhere, but, you know, the way to survive all of that is to have a small trench like a ravine and get in there and maybe, you know, pull a board over you, a sheet of sheet metal, weigh it down with rocks so the wind can't lift it, and you'll be fine against any flying debris. The wind will go right over you. Nothing will cover you. Nothing will fall on you to kill you during the earthquakes. And then go back and get out and see if your house is still standing and pick up from there. But if you go into underground bunkers, that can be a death trap. Can you imagine the elevators not working or the entryway just shut because there was a rock shift? You know that's likely to happen. So these people are building their own tombs, but they're trying to escape the winds. They're trying to escape the public. They don't want the public banging on their doors. So they open the doors. Let's say this works. They have some sort of a, you know, whatever, an enclave, and they open the doors, and now they have a bunch of really angry survivors who say, you didn't tell us. You didn't, you know, warn us, and you think you're going to come and say, well, our food has run out now. What have you got for supper? And that won't work at all. You know, they'll be turned on by an enraged survivor community. So what about their militia, their guns, the military that they're going to have? Well, you know, the only reason that hired guns humans work, and that's what the military is because they've been guaranteed a pension and medical care and and they're well paid and all the rest of that stuff. But if you can't guarantee that stuff anymore, why do they have to listen to their old bosses? So Mr. Rich over here hires militia, and the minute the door is shut, the militia says, Mr. Rich can go clean the toilets because I like the way his daughter looks, and where is the liquor bar? And they take over. And this, of course, is the stuff of movies all the time because that's how these people think. Blackwater, these
Right.
kind of people, are you going to hire them for your security? Good luck. It will last until the door is shut because there's no court system. There's no phones. They can't be called to account, for what they do to their wealthy employers or their politically powerful employers. The federal government isn't going to function. They're going to move to Denver or maybe Kokomo or some other place, and there they will argue amongst themselves and have no influence outside of their immediate room, or as far as they can throw a stone. But governments are going to be functioning only if they can really serve the people, and it'll probably be local governments, and only then if they are effective in managing. Natural leaders will emerge, and those people who got themselves elected by, hot air and strutting around and political connections or whatever the heck, they're not going to be leading. Nobody's going to buy them as leaders. You have to be able to really produce in your leadership so that natural leaders will emerge. They will often be women or even children, because children have very open eyes and actually are very resourceful. They don't have fixed thinking the way adults do. So men, say, where's the enemy? And they want to roll up their sleeves, and there is no enemy. Women are used to keeping life going, the food, the laundry, whatever, the household, take care of the sick, and they'll just up and do that, and therefore they will be leading. And that's what's likely to happen. So all this business with a carry-on government and they're going to emerge and take over, it won't happen. But they think it will.
What do you make of a recent report by NASA, once again, that states that our magnetic shield, the one that protects the Earth from solar radiation, is rumbling or shaking, and that magnetic reverberations are being detected at ground stations all across the globe? What could be causing these to occur around the globe? NASA says they're unsure of the cause. What is your feeling on that?
At least there's a touch of honesty in that, huh? When you have a large magnetosphere come in, we have magnetic planets. The sun is a big magnetic planet, and it does not flip. It's every 11 years, like NASA said. Their own Ulysses probe showed that. It went by, the North Pole and then the South and then the North or whatever in like late 1990s and said, okay, North is up, South is down. Then year 2000 came and NASA said, oh, the 11-year cycle, it's flipped. Now North is down and South is up. And then their probe went by again and said, nope, everything's the same. And they were so ashamed, for a while they sputtered and said maybe it had two south poles, the sun did. And finally they just stripped all that information away and pretended it never happened. But, they're still telling the lie that it flips every 11 years. So stuffed egos there. They're rigid. So what's happening now? Well, the sun is upright, and the Earth and Mercury are also magnetic, and they're pointing in the same direction as the sun. All the planets in the solar system adapt to an even larger influence because our whole solar system is part of a magnetic field of something else yet that is even huger than our solar system. We're just along one of the magnetic field lines of flow, and they've discovered that recently. They're saying it's kind of like a magnetic river waving along just outside the solar system, and the Zetas have always said this. So what happens when Planet X comes toward us? Well, magnets like to either go end to end, so that my North Pole is at your South Pole, right, and end to end. They snap in a line like that if you let these little magnets do that. Or side by side, they'll do that. They'll all line up side by side, but they don't like to be, every which way. The smaller magnets are encouraged to go either end to end or side by side, and I think there's even an opposition where, anything coming out of my North Pole immediately goes to your South Pole and vice versa. So it's like they're lying side by side, but your feet are in my face and my feet are in your face, that type of thing. So and this is happening to the Earth. The Earth is twisting all over the place, trying to get comfortable For years since Planet X came into the solar system, early 2004, we detected an Earth wobble, which forms a figure 8 if you're looking down on the North Pole. And I was able to compute this by collecting data from people all over the world. Where is your sun rising? What's the azimuth? That's the 360 around. Time and date, place, all that. And was able to compute how the wobble is happening, and it was always this figure 8. And that's continued up until this last month, July, in which it's a figure 8 plus more stuff. And it's all in an attempt when the North Pole, which is not quite at our geographic North Pole, it's off center a bit, comes around the horizon so that it's facing the sun and Planet X, which is coming at us from the direction of the sun, then it gets a shove. And it's shoved away. And then after it escapes around the horizon again, it can bounce back. So it's like shove, bounce, every day. And people were able to record this. We had somebody in the Ukraine that caught Jupiter at night, on film, and they said in 20 minutes it moved from this position to that position, marking the photograph, right? Overlaid photographs, kind of like long exposure. And it was astonishing. There's no way it could move that distance except that that's an Earth wobble. And people have reported laying on their backs and watching the moon, and in a very clear night, and seeing the moon, actually move in that similar manner where it either stays in place too long or moves in the wrong direction or moves too far. So the Earth wobble is very detectable if you bother to look and take measurements and not just trust and say something, like, oh, the sun is rising and setting every day. Everything's normal, because it's not. So it's all attempting to deal with this intense magnetic field which keeps crowding closer and crowding closer. It's a conflict between what the sun is telling the Earth to do, which is stand up straight, and the way I'm standing, my north is your north. It's a conflict between that and the approaching Planet X, which keeps telling it to do flip, 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 try to come into some other arrangement to accommodate Planet X. And meanwhile, all these planets are kind of dithering. We have Venus kind of trapped, along with the Earth in front of Planet X, and the Earth's dark twin, which is normally opposite the sun from the Earth, so we never see it. It came around in early 2004. We got photos of it, and it's coming up behind Planet X. Behind the Earth in its same orbit, and it's stuck there. And we've got some photos of that. And all of these 4 planets, which are like sisters, dark twin Earth and Venus are the same size of each other, are stuck in front of Planet X, which is coming closer and closer. And meanwhile, they're all kind of bouncing off each other as though you are in an elevator and shaking and bing-bonging off each other. So it's not real static, and it changes, but it sure is causing earthquakes.
With the state of our economy today, and of course all the many problems that face us here in this country, it seems like the idea of catastrophic solar flares is not something that's on the minds of a lot of people these days. In fact, I wonder exactly how many people are paying any attention to these warnings that are coming from NASA. And then we got to wonder why even bother to say anything to the media or to the general public about this, what they're referring to as a once-in-a-generation event. We understand why they're saying it, but what's the idea of telling it to the general public? Because the public's so concerned with other things, they're not really paying attention to what's going on.
Well, they're losing their credibility. They're crying wolf. That story of the boy that cried wolf too often, and then when the wolf really came, nobody listened to him. Yeah, and that's what they're doing, because now they lose their credibility, and someone says, NASA is warning, and everybody says, because, it never happens. It doesn't happen in step. So what are they going to do? Have continuous alerts, like any minute?
Well, that's what I mean. It's going to come to the point, Nancy, where they're going to say, oh, it's another warning from NASA, so what, But then maybe in this future event that's going to take place, it's really going to be something that they should be worried about, but they're going to say, oh, I'm not worried.
Right, that's true, except that the Earth changes. There's an anxiety level rising within the general public. And people have mentioned, the irritability, distractibility. People are getting sick an awful lot. You go through McDonald's, you order a chicken sandwich, and you get a hot dog, and you don't even bother to complain because it might get worse. People are distracted, and they know something's wrong. They sense they're being lied to. The other day, about a month ago, the sun came up almost an hour early where I am. I was stunned. I said, oh boy, it's so far north and it's awfully early. And I checked in and it was 5:15 and it wasn't supposed to even rise until 5:45, and it was up, up above the hill and my neighbor's roofs, so I could see it. So, and then went right back the next day to not being there. If you're a citizen and you see something like that, you have an uneasy feeling that something's going on.
Has
right?
this phenomenon been occurring in other places besides your locale?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's other people report this kind of stuff. We track, the Earth wobble and the like, and it's reported on email, just floods of reports. So the moon is very erratic. It's supposed to be 5 degrees off the ecliptic at any given time. It's way north between new and full, and way south between full and new. And people, and it's so far south. I think it's a street light on the street south to me, and it's supposed to be like overhead. So it's and people, little old ladies will say, oh, I've lived in this house all my life, and let me tell you, the moon never shone in that window. Never, this kind of observation is being done. Then there's the weather. The weather is so extreme, and they tried to blame global warming, and then global warming was proven to be a hoax, and more dirt is coming out about that, about, how they played with the data, cherry-picked the data, and the like, and it's not true. Although there is heating from the core of the Earth up, this is not man-made. If the rock is warmer down lower than it is up higher toward the surface, well, how can that happen, if the heat is drilling down? So it's not global warming, so they can't blame that, but the weather is just wild. Droughts and deluge and intractable and switching about and vertical jet streams instead of horizontal jet streams, and people know something is wrong.
Of course, we always get a logical explanation from the media and from meteorologists and weather people about why these events are taking place.
Yeah, but after a while, when there's so many facets, it's where the sun and the moon and the constellations are, what's happening with the weather, and there's crop failures, so the economy is bad, and food shortages are starting to show up, mostly with empty shelves, and the prices have gone up, but there's a lot of price controlling going on behind the scenes so that the public does not panic. Starvation is increasing around the world. You just ask the UN. They've been reporting it for a few years already. And they know that something is not right, but it's too multifaceted. It's not just that the compass is wacky, or that the electronics go wacky every now and then, but it's the constellations, the sun and the moon and the weather, and the general feeling, that they're being lied to, that they're not being told the truth. There's a perception in the public that government is lying to them just because it is not addressing the weather extremes and what they're seeing. If someone were to say in the media, if they had said this all along, the Earth has developed a wobble and we don't know why, but we're looking into it, then people would say, oh, it's not a cover-up. They're looking into it, right? Or if, something like that. But they don't. They say, chirp, chirp, and talk about who's getting married or divorced and like that, and they never address the fact that the moon is cockamamie off its orbit. So why wouldn't you? Why would you have astronomers like NASA come out and say, blah, 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 and not have them talk about why the moon is not in the right place? So for those people that see something like that, they know they're being lied to. They are certain of that. That makes them uneasy. So whether NASA says, oh, this or that, now the fact that the NASA issues warnings and nothing happens only adds to their distrust. There's a very deep distrust of government.
I guess the greatest tragedy in all of this is the fact that there is this distraction. People are going about their daily lives, have no idea that anything is happening other than what they would consider to be the norm or what's being reported as the norm by the media. And yet there's all these strange and unusual things going on that people just simply aren't aware of, either aren't aware of or probably don't care. So that's the great tragedy right there.
It is a tragedy, and but contactees are on the increase. Those that sense something is wrong are giving what the Vedas call is termed the call, a request for counseling. And this amounts to you get a visit from aliens, and of course you can decline at any point, because it's in your hands. You gave the call, you can decline, but they start to chat with aliens, and they get the truth. They pick up all the vibes. The vibes are good. They know they're being told the truth, and they listen, and they're told what else to look for, and they look into that, and they say, holy cow. They're told how to bump into each other. Go to this bookstore at such and such a time in the morning, Saturday morning, and you'll find the, blah, 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 and then they bump into each other and make friends. And contactees are on the increase worldwide. Group meetings are occurring on spaceships, or they're all taken to some big barn somewhere and have a big meeting, and they know each other. Then when they bump into each other in normal society, they have this feeling that they know the person from somewhere, and they just get along with them right from the start, so that future survival communities are already being formed by this means where you meet people. And this is what people are doing with their anxiety, because they know they can't trust the media. They are reaching out and, in essence, seeking information from elsewhere, and they're getting it from the visitors.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about these extraordinary Earth and climate events that Nancy and I have been talking about that are happening now and are continuing to happen, and what we're going to find out, or try to find out if we can, what could be causing these great disasters. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back with our guest, Nancy Lay. This year we are seeing a number of record-breaking climate-related events happening all over the world. If you haven't been following the news, let me just recap some of these events. And I would ask you to bear with me here for just a moment, because this will be leading up to my next question for Nancy. This year started out with a bang when the Caribbean country of Haiti suffered a catastrophic earthquake, so tremendous that it virtually destroyed most of the infrastructure and buildings in the capital of Port-au-Prince. The country is still picking up the pieces from that disaster, while they still await the monetary aid that was promised or pledged in their recovery process. After about a month later, in February of this year, a massive quake occurred along the coast of Chile. This quake was so large that it sent waves reverberating across the Pacific Ocean. Fortunately for the residents of Hawaii, the Pacific Islands, and Japan, the tsunami generated by this South American quake fizzled out before reaching the Pacific coastlines. In April, Brazil suffered its worst floods in nearly 40 decades, with tens of thousands of Brazilians left homeless. The same month, we saw the beginning of the BP Deep Horizon oil well disaster unfold, an event that has been labeled as the worst environmental catastrophe to beset the United States. And although the well has finally been capped and cemented shut, the devastation that has been wrought will affect the lives of people and sea life along the Gulf Coast for possibly decades to come. In May, the city of Nashville and parts of Tennessee suffered the worst flooding in living memory, when a record 20 inches of rain fell in a short time span. The flooding severely damaged or destroyed large swaths of downtown Nashville. Coincidentally, this major climate event was given very little media attention. In June, we began witnessing dozens of huge sinkholes opening up in both Guatemala and in Central America and halfway across the globe in China. These sinkholes occurred without prior warning and for no apparent reason. In July and continuing into this month of August, we are seeing unprecedented long-lasting heat waves across New England and across the southeastern part of the United States. The heat waves extend into Russia and Eastern Europe and across much of the Northern Hemisphere. The wildfires in Russia are so severe that Moscow is blanketed in a heavy toxic smog that is claiming the life of nearly, and this is what is being reported, nearly 700 people each and every day, according to the Guardian magazine. All the while that the Northern Hemisphere bakes in heat and wildfires, the Southern Hemisphere, on the contrary, the countries of Chile, Peru, Brazil, and Argentina are experiencing extreme sub-zero temperatures and snowy conditions. These are also reports out of Bolivia that its river system is experiencing the deaths of millions of fish, turtles, and reptiles as a result of the brutally cold weather. August thus far has been a month of major floods, especially in Pakistan, where thousands have died and millions displaced by a monsoon the likes of which has not been seen in over 8 decades. Here in the United States, the flooding continues in the cities of Des Moines and Ames, Iowa, where torrential rains are causing havoc in the normally quiet and serene Midwestern cities. Now, Nancy, the NOAA is claiming that the first half of 2010 is by far the warmest on record, surpassing that of 2005 in intensity. It seems pretty obvious that the planet is getting warmer and the climate change is becoming more extreme in nature. But what isn't clear is the cause of this and how it appears to be happening all at once and so quickly. Some are saying that many of the climate-related disasters that we are seeing in recent weeks were brought about by the activity of the sun and the influence of solar storms. Is there any credibility in this theory that the sun drives weather, or should we be looking at less obvious reasons for these super events?
It's not due to the sun. As we were discussing in the first half, and this is the hoped-for excuse, was going to be global warming, and then the hoped-for excuse was that the sun is somehow doing this. But, while the northern hemisphere has had heat waves all around, we have in the U.S., Moscow, Europe, etc., the South has had cold extremes in some places in South America, worse than the livestock is dying, extreme cold. Well, this is not global warming or gradual warming then, because it means that the globe itself, during our northern summer, is pointed too far to the sun, getting too much sunlight, and the south is getting too little. So this is, again, the influence of Planet X. Likewise with sinkholes, which you were mentioning, this is not really related to the weather, although sometimes they try to say, oh, there was lots of rain and it washed things out. There's a type of limestone rock in places like China and the U.S. and where that happens, karst formation, I think it's called, that when a lot of water runs through it, it does eat away the limestone, and therefore it's fragile and can fall. But the number of sinkholes and the dramatic, huge size is just jaw-dropping. Big ones in Guatemala, a couple of them, and they just look like somebody took a giant peg of the gods and went flunk. It's a nice round hole. It goes down to where you can't even see the bottom. I guess it isn't bottomless, but nevertheless, holy cow, a whole city block just disappears. And likewise in China, this round structure, and there they are, just a whole school, and the yards around it, boom, it's down in a hole, for instance. And things like on Highway 24 in Tennessee, big sinkhole dropping. And there's so many incidences that it's hard to even collect the news articles, and they try to keep them out of the universal news. They try to keep this local so that people do not realize the extent of this issue. This is caused by...
I found it very curious, like I had said to you at the beginning of this, that we had this major flood event that took place in Nashville, and of course it did get some media attention. There were a lot of video that was taken by YouTube people and posted on their sites, and so we were able to get it to that extent. But the media refused to continue discussing the situation up in Tennessee, which was a lot different than with Katrina, where we've seen so much of the media come down and do all of these different reports, and it went on for weeks. Whereas up in Nashville, we were hardly hearing anything about it. And a lot of people are saying, what is going on here? This is a major event. This is affected people's lives.
It got on the cover-up list, and there's things that are on, and they gradually get on, like anyone saying, oh, I saw two suns rising or two suns setting. You'll never hear a mention of that, and they've stopped showing live sunrise and sunsets behind the weatherman, because the weatherman would sometimes turn around and say, holy cow, when the double sunrise or sunset would show up. So that's a no-no. Fireballs screaming in because the debris in the tail of Planet X is in our atmosphere. This increase is just humongous. It used to be like once every, 10 years or something, you'd have a big bolide like that come in. And now it's like every couple of months somewhere. It screams across several provinces or several countries. But, they try to keep it out of the national media. The Internet, of course, it goes a little viral. That they can't control that. That's another no-no. Don't talk about fireballs. Now it's sinkholes. Now it's deluge and floods, obviously, you've just pointed out. Keeping the number of earthquakes and the size of them out. They dumb down the statistics. They take the earthquakes out of the database, and if it's a 7, they make it a 5.2, like that. And you can tell this when they first started doing it, because magnitude is associated not only with the force of the thrust, but also by the area affected, and it can be computed. And people would say, I'm telling you, that was not a 5.2, that was a 7. And so after a while, you get inured to that. You get used to being lied to. People's houses will shudder and shake, and they'll say, what was that? And everybody just says, oh, we can't figure it out. Who knows? Probably your imagination.
And this is something we're hearing a lot about these days, is the shuddering and shaking of people's homes in many locales, not just in the United States, but this is happening all over now, right?
There's a cover-up that goes on, and it's caught at a high level with the media. The media is owned by the power brokers, the wealthy and the powerful, and they will just say, and anyone who refuses to cooperate with this no longer has a job. So you have to have good liars that can follow the list and say, and then it's caught, and it doesn't go out on the national news. It's caught and removed. Oh, this is a no-no. This is a no-no list. So everybody talks about the newscaster's hairstyle, or the pet puppy that got saved from a drainage hole, and that gets the news, but you don't hear about what's really important. And that's going to continue. Unless somebody who's a broadcaster breaks down and says, we're not supposed to tell you this, but this is what's happening, then, and they can't because there's a 30-second delay. Someone's hit the switch, all of a sudden, whoops, they have transmission trouble. You will not hear it. So it's up to the internet is a godsend in this regard because you can get information on the internet, but they don't want anything to be really out there at a national level. They want people dumb up until the end for all the reasons I mentioned. Pay your taxes, do your job, don't bother the powerful and the wealthy because they don't want your messy panic, and you don't count. You don't count. Yeah.
Okay, you've been educating the public now for a number of years about your belief, which of course others share with you, about Planet X, also known as Nibiru, which is a rogue planet 4 times the size of Earth, which is hovering in our solar system on a journey across the ecliptic. Now, this planet is said to be connected in theory to the reasons for the major events that are now taking place here on this planet. And that ultimately is believed that its passage across the solar system will bring it close enough to us to cause a major pole shift to occur, something that has apparently occurred a number of times in our ancient past. Now, you're still very committed to this understanding that this celestial body will cross our path and that we should be prepared for some disturbing events to occur if we haven't prepared ourselves already. Now, being a self-proclaimed contactee for the alien race called the Zeta Reticuli, are you more convinced about this planet because of your ability to communicate with them and the way in which they have confided in you, or is it more something you strongly feel from within that you may have known for years, even decades, would come about during this time period?
Both, but actually there is so much solid physical evidence, so much confirmation. And I mentioned it's showing up on SOHO and the stereo ahead and behind images. That its presence is there. Recently, we've had images on the stereo ahead and behind, which are 2 satellites slightly ahead and behind the Earth in their orbits, and they try to see behind the sun what's going on. Venus bloomed. It had this big bubble that formed off of it, and it seemed brighter than it should. And there was also a situation where Jupiter was way too bright in the sky in a photo. And this is known as an astrophysics term called blooming, where light is pulled toward a gravity source, and therefore it appears to come from a direction that it's not. Well, in this particular view, Planet X, was near Venus and pulled light, toward it, and therefore it had this bubble appearing off of it. It was blooming light. And this is just one of hundreds of pieces of physical evidence that we have, that this body is there, people seeing it, catching it on film. What happens to the magnetosphere, which has no explanation, because the sun can be so quiet as to be in a coma, and the magnetosphere will be twisting all over the place, and on and on. And Zeta Talk Accuracy has got another whole list of 100 items that I could rattle off if we had a year to go through it. And I've done some documenting on that and to try to demonstrate to people, this is not just my imagination. This is real. It's not even in the database of human understanding what I come out with and say this is Zeta Talk and this is what they say. Then later, mankind comes out and says, oh, we just discovered blah, 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 blah. And it was something that Zeta said 8 years earlier. And so how could I, Nancy, know this and put this down when man hadn't even come up to that conclusion, right? So it's not me, it's them. It's physical. It's a physical thing that is showing up all over the place. Their accuracy is just proven beyond a doubt. And so therefore, I say what they say about what the pole shift is going to entail is going to be true also. Now, then you get into geological history. Every approximately 360 years, something has happened to the globe. The last time was the Jewish Exodus time, where a huge volcano in the middle of the Mediterranean blew up. I think it's on the island of Santorini. The
right.
volcano was known as
correct.
Thera. It was huge, 20 times stronger than Krakatoa that happened in 1882, which was the biggie in our lifetime, so to speak. Anyway, For some reason, the Egyptians were all discombobulated and let their slaves wander off, the little toddlers and the lame little old ladies and all that. The Red Sea, for some reason, heaved and and parted and allowed Moses and his group to go through. And this is all documented not only in the Bible, but also by the Egyptians in the Colburn Bible, which talks about the time of the flood also, which was 3 pole shifts back. So they go into geology, and you can trace back every 3,600 years or so, like when the woolly mammoths died off. Their last die-off was, by best estimates, 3,800 years ago. Well, that's awfully close to 3.6, right? And for some reason, these mammoths are up there on Wrangel Island in the polar circle, frozen solid, and they have green grass and buttercups in their tummy. Now, how did that happen? I mean, the flesh, if they have never melted from the day they froze, they're edible even by the sled dogs eat them. So what do? Get scared by a mouse and thunder up to the Arctic Circle? Clearly, there was a crustal shift, right, around the time of the Jewish Exodus. Potsdam University has computed that there was a shift in the axis during that time, and we moved south, which is why the Sahara got more desert-like. And according to the Vedas, Greenland was our last North Pole, and that's why it has all that ice up there. So ice ages, wandering poles, all of this geology is explained by the crustal shift that happens during polar shifts. And you can go back in time, approximately 3,600 years ago, all the oceans of the world dropped by 16 to 20 feet, all of them. Where did that water go? Did it vaporize? Obviously, the deep ocean crevasses opened up in some places and pulled it in, for that kind of a drop. And this is a scientific fact, but you don't hear about it. You hear the opposite. Whenever anyone on the media is talking to you about, geological changes, it's millions and millions of years ago, and, this kind, and it's the cover-up. But sometimes on the History Channel, they're getting pretty good about hinting around like crazy and saying this is our past, and this is what, more and more facts are being given to people.
I believe
you think it would be Discovery.
Planet X on the History Channel, or Discovery was one of those two.
I don't remember what was said, but I remember that Discovery is too tied into the cover-up, and History Channel tries to tell it to you straight. And I think, I'm not sure just how far they've gone, but they don't go so far. And even look at the movies that we're getting. It's the sun, the movie Knowing, where the sun explodes.
Right.
Even 2012, they didn't say passing planet. It was the sun bombarding the core of the Earth with something, neutrinos or something, and therefore it, heating up and destabilizing the plates, which shifted around. It wasn't the passing planet. And nobody's allowed to say passing planet. They can't say that. That's too close to the truth, and they're abiding by NASA's lie, which is it's all from the sun. And so where are you going to get the truth? Well, we're kind of counting on, in the first place, a lot of UFO displays, a lot of contactees, the Internet, word of mouth, I'm not sure what, but so far, and we had our fingers crossed with Obama, but it sure doesn't look like he's going to step forward either, although the Zetas say that he would be another JFK in a heartbeat if he tried to do that.
We're hearing a lot on the Internet these days about, like you were referring to, with Jupiter and Venus, have increased in brightness so much in the last decade or so. What is driving this increased brightness in these two planets? Is it the Planet X?
Yeah, there's a lot of sunlight bouncing off the dust cloud of Planet X, which is immense. It's huge. The moons stay within 5 million miles of Planet X, but the dust cloud wafts even, what is the sun to the Earth? It's 1 AU, astronomical unit or whatever. Even beyond that, that's how big it is. It's huge, and it blows around and blows out from the North Pole, and so consequently on the SOHO and the like, we see sometimes the moons lining up in like a string of pearls behind each other, and this is what's caught on film in 2003, and it's on SOHO a lot lately. And they try to get rid of this stuff. They try to quickly edit it out, but they would have to stop the process that people have come to rely on. And then if they took SOHO down and said, oh, the satellite's not working, which they try to do now and then, people would say, well, cover up. So they keep providing it, and they just ignore, when people say, what's that? They just ignore the question. They say it's an anomaly. Something happened. They make something up. It's Wee Willie Winky doing his thing again. Whatever they want to say, and then the public has to take that as truth. And it's But anyway, it's showing up all the time. And yes, it is. The tail collects sunlight, bouncing around, the blooming effect that I was mentioning, where light is drawn toward a gravity source, and therefore it kind of bends and accumulates, and it so that if you're standing in front of a gravity source and light is coming off the side, it bends towards this gravity source, then you collect it as part of the light that's emitting from you, and you look brighter than you should, just because you're standing near or in the line of sight, to where this light bends very readily. You stand in water, your feet are not below you, they're off to the side somewhere.
Well, there are some that actually believe that Venus is drawing closer to the Earth, and this is the reason.
Well, I think it is. It's supposed to be crowding. There's going to be drama in this regard, Steve. When the dark twin that I mentioned and Venus are both crowded, they're trapped in front of Planet X. How does that trap work? It's an eddy flow, and coming from the sun is all kinds of like solar wind kind of stuff. It goes around Planet X in its immense gravity field, and it wraps around like the claws of a crab, and encompasses the Earth, Venus, and the dark twin, who keep getting pushed back into this cup or eddy, in between the claws. And as it comes closer and closer, the squeeze is tighter and tighter. Eventually, according to what a lot of mythology has drawn and told us, Venus and the dark twin get close enough that it's pretty dramatic. But this is going into the last weeks, and they eventually jump out of this cup, pop out, and go on their way, just leaving the Earth alone to face Planet X as we approach the time of the pole shift. For instance, the Hindu gods, they have Shiva, which represents Planet X, the god of renewal and destruction and renewal, or whatever. And of course, that's the pole shift, where the whole world is crushed and changed, and the climates change, and then mankind rebuilds. And Kali is one of his wives, and she's a blue-black color. Well, that is, the dark twin is a solid black. It has no atmosphere, no water. And the only reason we saw it when it came around from behind the sun in early 2004 was because people were seeing a blue-yellow kind of glinting thing in the evening sky just after sundown out west, and that's what we caught on film too. And the Zeta said it reflects blue light when it does reflect at all, but once it got too close to us, reflecting sunlight went off into space somewhere, not toward us. But if you did get any light from it, it would be a bluish, blackish kind of light, and when we have caught it on film, that's what it looks like. So Kali is the dark twin, and the whole mythology is that Kali lives and stands with one foot on her husband, who's Shiva, who is Planet X moving on, and survives. As Shiva dies, she's seen briefly as very large and then disappears. So this is in mythology. And we will. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to have some real drama from Venus. Yeah.
Okay, there were some very interesting recent photos taken near the sun during early morning or late evening hours that were showing a second sun image, which could very well be the Planet X that you refer to. Now, some of these same images were posted on the Yao USA website, which is attributed to Marshall Masters, who, by the way, is a huge supporter of the Planet X theory and has produced a number of videos and has a radio show dedicated to the science behind Planet X. Now, with regard to these recent photos, it is his understanding that most of them are not really credible because they were taken in parts of the world where it is virtually impossible to view this planet, since it is coming up from below the ecliptic and can only be seen through a lens from the southern hemisphere, where apparently there is a telescope in place on the South Pole observing the incoming movement of this planet. Now, Nancy, he goes on to say that this planet would become obvious to the naked eye sometime late next year, 2011. So, Nancy, would you consider Masters' assessment to be accurate regarding visibility, and what do you make of his questioning the authenticity of these photos?
Yeah, I hear you. I think he gave in to the cover-up. I think he was leaned on. He knows. He's hoping to grab the stage. He's hoping to be the one that can be the Pied Piper and get a lot of attention, and be the one to lead people to understand what's coming and what's going on by cooperating with NASA and the government. He says, I'll buy your storyline that it's not in sight yet, that it's not here yet, and then you be nice to me. Well, I'm not sure that they are, but that's what he basically, I think he's too smart not to know that he's lying. It's not from the south. People all over can see it because it's around the sun, near the sun, in our line of sight. And it is true that there are a lot of photos that people take. Everyone's snapping pictures of the sun. It's very rare you get a real, genuine capture. A lot of times they're lens flares or ghosts because the sun can produce a ghost by reflecting off back and forth off of different lenses in either a window, a car window, or in the camera. But there are a lot of genuine captures. And the thing is, it shows up on Soho. It's right there, you know, just slightly, like at the fore, and it showed up during the eclipse, clear as bell. Now in the south, you see things upside down. You know, I joke around and say people in the North Pole are standing upright, at the South Pole they're hanging by their feet, right? It's upside down, and if you were standing upside down in the room, everything would look upside different to you too. The moon's face is in a different place in the southern hemisphere. So they had the eclipse down there, Chile and Fiji and those places in South Seas. And the first thing we had was a live camera, because if in the northern hemisphere it's showing up at about the 4 to 5 o'clock position from the sun, right? That's where its locale is in the view from the northern hemisphere. In the southern, it would be around 10, 11 o'clock. Well, there was a bump on the sun at about the 10 o'clock position, so they moved the webcam so that you could see everything except that part, you know, on national TV, worldwide live streaming. They had several streaming places that were showing it, the eclipse, because it happened over Fiji or you know, the South Seas and then rolled towards Chile. Anyway, for an hour ahead of time, they showed you the whole thing. The creep, which came, the moon came from around the 10, 11 o'clock position across the sun. You were allowed to see all of that, the slow creep that took an hour. Then we had the total eclipse. Well, you'd think that they would spend another hour showing you as it crept away, right? But no. The minute, you know, that edge of the sun, which would be 10, 11 o'clock, started to show, blink, every webcam worldwide went down. If you want proof of the cover-up, there it is. But so we didn't see it in webcam, although I saw a light source in that area around 10 o'clock.
So actually, it would have shown had they had not covered it up.
Well, had they not taken the webcam down, you would have seen it, you know. But they took it down before that part of the sun's corona could be seen, where you could see is there an extra body at 10, 11 o'clock? Because when the sun's glare is covered, you can see that, right? Otherwise, it's lost in the glare of the sun. Well, there were private photos that were taken and did not go down just because the webcams went down. And we got one from Cook Island that dramatically shows a body off the sun, not part of the sun, not a glare of light from that part of the sun at all, because what they call the, you know, the ring of fire or you know, wedding ring or whatever, like, you know, when the sun glints at the point where that is on the body of the sun. This was off into space outside of that. Clearly, Planet X, you know, beaming, you know, where we would have seen it had they not shut the webcams down. Now, that's not from the southern hemisphere. That's from everywhere. You know, everywhere on Earth people see this. So the second sun sightings and the like. And he's wrong. And he's either cooperating with the cover-up or stupid, and I don't think he's stupid. So a lot of people are doing this. They hope. About a year or two ago, anyone who authored a book and put 2012 in the title was all over. You know, they could sell books, they could get on the media. You know, they were just the darlings. We've always said the date is not to be given. It could be before 2012 or after or whatever. There's no magic about December 20. That's a guess. There's no way to line up the Gregorian and Mayan calendars, and to say that that's the date is just wrong. And yet, if you challenge these people, you know, they scuff and brush you aside. But they got a lot of media attention because they went along with the cover-up. And I just frankly have no respect for people that do that.
Well, it was recently reported, you know, you're referring to this all of a sudden there's this emergency to do things. On Coast to Coast, they had a guest on there. I can't recall the person's name, but apparently he was a legitimate member of FEMA, saying that FEMA was making emergency preparedness plans in the St. Louis and Memphis municipalities due to the distinct likelihood of a major earthquake in the New Madrid fault zone at any time, they're saying. Now, the other areas of great concern to that agency were the San Andreas Fault, Mount Rainier in Washington State, and the Yellowstone caldera in Wyoming. Now, we know there hasn't been a major event in Yellowstone in at least 600,000 years, and Rainier hasn't seen any significant volcanic activity since the mid-1800s. And as for the New Madrid fault zone, the last major quake there was nearly 200 years ago in 1811. So why the sudden urgency to set up headquarters in these areas when everything has been relatively quiet in terms of activity?
They know what's coming. They know. And actually, the number of people that follow Zeta Talk is just immense. I've gotten email from people over the years. One of them was, it was 7 years ago, and he said, I'm in and out of a major law firm in L.A. that does business for sheiks and movie stars and very wealthy people. And he said, you would be stunned to know how often your name and the name of Zeta Talk comes up around the water cooler. I know who follows me, and they take it seriously. Because of the Zeta Talk accuracy, I don't get the media. I'm not on CNN, because it's too accurate. I'm banned from coast to coast lately because it's too accurate. Any idiot can get on there and say any idiotic thing, but not me. And it's a ban because it's too accurate. And people will listen and they put two and two together and they say, holy cow, the ring of truth. And then they get all alarmed and look into it, and then, and they don't want that happening. They want people dumb, compliant, So the truth is very, very suppressed.
Well, what sort of timeline are the Zetas providing in the way of signals or in your communication with them that would provide a clue as to how much time is left to prepare and then lay in wait for this great celestial event to take place?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they won't tell you the date. They won't tell you how much time left. They will tell you a sequence of events. So for those worried about, the West Coast and the New Madrid, the good news is that there is a big clue that we're next. And recently, last November, I got to see a holographic presentation by a very weird-looking alien lady to humans in the audience. And I walked out on stage with her. My role was to make them feel more comfortable with her. So I walked out hand in hand. Although I think her feet were hooves. Anyway. And it was several things that could happen around the globe, and it would constitute a 7 of 10. Now, what a 10 of 10 is during the hour of the pole shift, 9 of 10 is the last weeks, the stress put on the globe then. 8 of 10 we're not even talking about, but 7 of 10 is major plate movement on the following way. Just north of Algeria, the Mediterranean floor will crumble as the African rolls. The plate diving into the Himalayas will tip slightly so that the western part goes down and the eastern part raises a little bit, that curve where the Sumatra quake occurred. Meanwhile, Indonesia pushes under that a little bit, pushing it down so the sea level in all those islands, Sumatra, Java, Malay Peninsula, even the South China, coastline, will find itself flooding. That's another one. And South America would roll the top part of it to the west, rolling over the Caribbean plate, pushing this down further, so the islands just to the north of South America would find they're losing sea level elevation. And then another one was, of course, the New Madrid adjustment, which is going to be horrific and tear all the bridges on the Mississippi, because it'll be an adjustment from Mexico all the way up to Chicago and over to New England. And when that happens, shortly after that, within hours, the Zetas have said, the Atlantic Rift will pull apart to the extent that water rushing into it and then rebounding will follow the Gulf Stream and strike Europe in what they've called the European tsunami, 200 to 300 feet high on the UK coast. Like Spain gets, I think, 30, 40 feet, and Norway like that, and even 100 feet high as it goes into the North Sea toward like the Netherlands and the like. Terrific tsunami. But they have said prior to the New Madrid break, there's going to be major quakes in Japan that will be really Richter 9, magnitude 9, but will be called 8s. And there'll be more than one of them. And when that happens, get ready for the New Madrid. And after the New Madrid goes, then we're going to have the west coast of the U.S. adjusting also, on blowing off the volcanoes and the like.
Now, could we be looking for the
Mississippi River? We're not talking about
River?
Little.
Right.
Huh?
Could we be looking for the Mississippi River to be flowing backwards as it did in the 1811 quake?
Not until the hour of the pole shift. They haven't predicted that. They've just said that to the west, and it'll move toward the south. To the east, it'll move up, and so it's really a skew, breaking all these bridges. And the land just to the west will be dropping, so that there'll be more flooding to the west of the Mississippi. They didn't say, and I'm not talking about many states, whether it's 50 miles or whatever, but the Mississippi will therefore broaden in that regard. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure change its course. That would be the minor part of it.
There are so many things happening today that have a direct impact on our lives, and of course time is moving on too quickly, as has our time on today's segment, Nancy. And as always, it's a pleasure having you on this show, and hopefully we'd like to have the opportunity for you to come back again. So thanks so much for taking the time with us today.
My pleasure always.
And we'll hopefully have you back again.
Thank you much.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Now for today's program. Back in June, you may have read or heard about a highly unusual and somewhat controversial warning from NASA about our planet, that it would be subjected to devastating solar flares from a massive once-in-a-generation space storm sometime around the year 2013, or to be more precise, just a little more than 2 years from now, we could expect this huge solar event to take place. So serious were NASA's warnings that they actually convened a space weather conference in our nation's capital to discuss the necessary precautions that would be required in order to step up national security and emergency action in anticipation of a catastrophic event from space. In their published statement, NASA indicated that we should expect that an event of this magnitude would cause widespread power blackouts and the long-term loss of critical satellite communications, which would include the internet and cell phones. Senior space agency scientists are now claiming that the Earth will be hit by unprecedented levels of magnetic energy from flares that will be generated by an active sun that is awakening from a deep slumber. As a matter of fact, the director of NASA's Heliophysics Division, Dr. Richard Fisher, states in an interview with the Daily Telegraph that NASA knows it is coming to Earth, that we can't say how bad it is going to be, but we do know that it is going to cause lots of problems here on Earth. So as far as the general public is concerned, we know the following about this rather ambiguous warning from the space agency. Number one, something that will be approaching from the general direction of the sun and that contains unprecedented amounts of magnetic energy is going to hit the Earth sometime in 2012 or the following year. Number two, this solar event, as NASA calls it, will damage or destroy satellite communications across the globe, causing widespread blackouts resulting in the loss of the internet, cell phones, and an array of electronic devices for an undetermined amount of time. Number three, the government is meeting to discuss ways to deal with the devastation that is expected to occur with this solar event, setting up national security and dealing with emergency response systems. Number four, it's uncertain as to the extent of damage that this event will incur on the Earth, yet nevertheless, it is going to happen and we should prepare ourselves now. So this is what we know. But does any of us really understand what's happening? And should we adhere to these warnings or maybe just take it with a grain of salt? Is NASA telling us the truth or rather keeping us in the dark about the real facts and what's actually going to happen in the days and months ahead? Our guest on today's segment, Nancy Later, is no stranger to our show. She has been with us here a number of times and is well known by many across the internet, including her appearances on the nationally syndicated Coast to Coast and a host of local radio programs. She has devoted her time and energy to educating the public on ways to survive catastrophic events. In particular, those events created by what is referred to as a cosmic presence of considerable magnitude that is believed to be present within our solar system today, and we'll get into the meaning of this interpretation of what I'm referring to here on the program today. So I would now like to welcome back to our show, hi Nancy.
Oh, so pleased to be back, and of course, it's not the sun, it's Planet X, Nibiru, Wormwood, the Great Destroyer, whatever name you want to call it. They know that our magnetosphere is already being engaged by this approaching planet, which is coming outbound from the sun, and it's slightly closer to the sun than Venus at present, but coming outbound, and it's engaging our magnetosphere. Since the middle of 2009, we've had this twisting and turning of our magnetosphere being simulated by the ACE computer, ACE satellite, which hangs up there. And sometimes our south pole disappears. Sometimes the flow, instead of going north and coming around to the south of Earth, it'll come out of the North Pole and plunge directly south, and then the return to the South Pole comes from the netters up above, down and curves into. It's just wacky. And what's causing this is Planet X, because its magnetosphere is larger than ours. It is 4 times as the diameter of Earth, 23 times the mass, and naturally it's a magnetic bully and it wins. And as it approaches us, we're like a little magnet flipping around trying to figure out how to position ourselves so that we, because magnets do this. You can't get the North Poles to touch, for instance. Sometimes we lean, currently we're having some leaning of our North Pole too far to the south, too far to the sun, rather, and causing heat waves across our entire northern hemisphere. Russia is just baking. and then it'll sometimes flop over too far to the left, falling on its side. So people in the northern latitudes say that the sunrise and sunset is way too far north. And other times our Earth wobble is lurching more violently, causing the plate movement and more increasing earthquakes, which even with the USGS cover-up is still apparent to people on the charts when they run statistics. And you know they're dropping those earthquakes from the databases. And you know they're dumbing down the Richter so they don't tell you the truth.
Would you say that this is some sort of like a scaremongering type of thing by NASA? Because we know that what they're telling us is, well, that's going to be very disturbing to a lot of people who pay attention to these reports. But do those who follow these solar trends and these warnings coming from scientists, it seems a little bit confusing and misleading, to us particularly, because, for a lot of people, we know what's going on out there, but for others, and there's a lot more of those others out there, they don't know what's going on, so this is really confusing to them.
Right. Actually, here's what NASA is trying to do. They're trying to avoid admitting that Planet X is in our inner solar system. We tracked it in 2003 from the night sky, according to the theta coordinates, the right angle and declination. And it's showing up on SOHO and in the form of a winged globe or a red cross, and the dust clouds and moon swirls spotches are showing up. And they try to edit it out, and they can't. They considered taking SOHO down and decided just to ignore it instead. You can see the edit lines. They are desperately trying to avoid saying there's a planet interloper in our inner solar system approaching us, and we've been lying to you all this time, because they would have, they're under orders by their bosses to keep the cover-up going. The very wealthy, the politically powerful, and the like, known as the elite or the establishment, a general term, do not want the common man to know, because they don't want your messy panic. They don't want your demands. They don't want you saying, okay, if you've got a bunker all stocked up, where's my bed? And the like. They don't want you rioting and trying to overtake the military. They want everything calm until the last minute. Then they'll run to their bunkers and be safe. And this includes the elite, the head hierarchy at NASA. So what are they doing? At first they said, well, we know it's coming. What are we going to do? Well, let's blame global warming for all the weather changes that might happen. Let's blame the sun for any magnetic effects that might happen. And we'll blame asteroid swarms. If they see the moon swirls, they'll say, oh, it's asteroid swarms. I mean, these moons show up on the stereo ahead and behind satellites, and and the Internet is abuzz with discussion about what is this stuff. And people really do not believe NASA if they have enough knowledge and are informed about what the rays coming from the sun are. They recognize that they're being spoon-fed, nonsense. And
well, here's what's really perplexing about what's going on with NASA, because they seem to be, in the last few years, they've really been wavering on this solar maximum and solar minimum stuff that's coming from these people. Like in 2006, for instance, they were telling us to expect a strong cycle in which the northern lights would be visible as far south as Rome, they were saying. Then during the past couple of years, in which little or no sunspot activity occurred, they told us to expect one of the weakest cycles since 1928. And so now, in the past couple of months, in which the sun has awakened from its slumber, the folks over there at NASA are suddenly worried about this catastrophic solar storm hitting the Earth in the next couple of years. Now, Nancy, given this unreliability of the NASA team to provide an accurate prediction of future solar events, how much credence should we really place in their lasting warning of a planetary disaster from a massive solar flare in the next few years? Is there a lot of credence in this?
No, none. And what you should do is listen to Zeta Talk, who is telling you what's going to happen and where it's coming from, because we are having electromagnetic disturbances. Air France 447, for instance, went down exactly over the Atlantic Rift, which is a surface magnet, because all of its electrical systems failed. They know that because a transmission came just ahead of when it went into the water. They never will recover the black box. But and there's been electromagnetically driven trains, that have gone awry and just suddenly surged and flown off the tracks. Airplanes are having a lot of problems. GPS is not working right, etc., and their compasses are totally unreliable. The compass is pointing oddly, way too far to the west, not north. So all of this has been predicted and explained by Zeta Talk all along, and we're going to continue to have that and blackouts because our whole grid system is designed to shut down if there's a surge or a brownout, and this is protection to keep the equipment from breaking. And dams, we've had transformers